Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her environmental suit's air recycler for the third time in an hour. The readings were still green, but something about this asteroid felt wrong. Her team had been excavating Site Delta 7 for 6 months, following magnetic anomalies that suggested dense metallic deposits beneath the surface. What they found instead changed everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. "Chen, you need to see this," Marcus Rodriguez called through the comm, his voice tight with excitement and something else she couldn't identify. Fear, maybe. Or wonder. Sarah bounded across the asteroid's low-gravity surface in long, practiced leaps. The excavation site sprawled before her like an archaeological dig, except instead of ancient pottery or bones, her team had uncovered what appeared to be artificial metal structures. Structures that predated human civilization by what their dating equipment suggested was millions of years. Marcus stood at the edge of a newly exposed section, his helmet lights casting stark shadows across a surface that definitely wasn't natural rock. The metal beneath their feet was dark, almost black, but it held a subtle pattern that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. More importantly, it was clearly manufactured. "Run the scans again," Sarah said, though she knew Marcus had probably done so a dozen times already. "I've run them 23 times, Sarah. Carbon dating is useless on this material." "But the geological layers above it? They're definitely from the Permian period. This thing has been buried for at least 250 million years." Sarah knelt beside the exposed section and ran her gloved hand across the surface. Even through her suit's environmental barriers, she could feel that the material was somehow different. Not just in temperature or texture, but in some fundamental way that made her skin crawl with anticipation. "What do you think it is?" asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their xenoarchaeologist. The irony wasn't lost on any of them that they'd brought a specialist in potential alien artifacts to what was supposed to be a routine mining survey. "I think," Sarah said slowly, "we need to call this in. And I think we need to expand the dig site. A lot." 3 weeks later, the asteroid designated Delta 7 had been declared a restricted research zone by the United Earth Council. The mining operation had been suspended indefinitely, replaced by the largest archaeological expedition in human history. Ships arrived daily, bringing equipment, specialists, and a level of security that suggested the government was taking this discovery very seriously indeed. The structure they'd uncovered was vast. What had initially appeared to be scattered metal debris was actually the hull of something enormous buried beneath millions of years of accumulated space dust and rock. As they carefully excavated more sections, the shape became clear: it was a ship. A starship of impossible proportions and utterly alien design. Sarah stood in the main command tent, studying holographic projections of their latest scans. The ship stretched for nearly 2 kilometers beneath the asteroid's surface. Its design was unlike anything in human engineering, all flowing curves and organic-looking bulges that somehow still managed to convey a sense of incredible power and sophistication. "We've found what might be an airlock, Dr. Tanaka reported, highlighting a section of the hull that showed different metallic properties. "Or at least, what our best guesses suggest could be an airlock. The metallurgy is unlike anything we've ever seen." "Any signs of power?" Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. Nothing could maintain power for millions of years. Could it? "That's the strange thing," Marcus said, pulling up another display. "We're getting trace electromagnetic readings from the interior. Not much, barely above background radiation, but there's definitely something active in there." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the asteroid's ambient temperature. "Active how?" "We're not sure. It could be residual energy from some kind of long-life power source. Or it could be something else entirely. The energy signature doesn't match anything in our databases." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's chief physicist, cleared her throat. "There's something else. We've been analyzing the hull material, and we think we know why this ship survived intact for so long. The metal isn't just resistant to corrosion and radiation. It actively repairs itself at a molecular level." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Self-repairing materials? That's beyond our current technology by centuries. Millennia, more like, Elena corrected. The engineering required to create something like this suggests a civilization that had mastered nanotechnology, exotic matter manipulation, and energy sources we can barely theorize about. Sarah stared at the hologram, watching as new scan data continuously updated the ship's profile. Each new detail revealed more complexity, more evidence of technological sophistication that made humanity's achievements look primitive by comparison. And yet, here it was, buried and silent on a random asteroid in their own solar system. "We need to get inside," she said finally. "Sarah, that could be incredibly dangerous," Dr. Tanaka warned. "We have no idea what's in there. The ship could be booby-trapped, or contaminated, or contain pathogens that could, or it could contain the greatest discovery in human history," Sarah interrupted. "Evidence of an advanced alien civilization, technology that could revolutionize our understanding of physics, possibly even the key to faster-than-light travel. We can't just leave it buried." Over the next few days, the team worked around the clock to locate and access what they believed was the ship's primary entrance. The airlock, if that's what it was, responded to none of their attempts to activate it through conventional means. It wasn't until Dr. Vasquez suggested applying a specific electromagnetic frequency that the ancient mechanisms finally stirred to life. The sound was unlike anything they'd ever heard. Not quite mechanical, not quite organic, but something that seemed to resonate through the asteroid itself. The airlock dilated open like a living iris, revealing a passage that glowed with a soft, blue-white light that had no visible source. Sarah was the first through, followed closely by Marcus and a full survey team. The passage was larger than expected, clearly designed for being significantly bigger than humans. The walls were smooth and seamless, made of the same self-repairing material as the hull, but here it seemed more alive somehow, with patterns of light that pulsed gently beneath the surface. "The atmosphere is breathable," reported Dr. Singh, their environmental specialist. "In fact, it's perfectly breathable. Oxygen, nitrogen, trace gases, all in exactly the proportions we'd find comfortable. That can't be a coincidence." They moved deeper into the ship, past corridors that branched and curved in ways that seemed to follow some alien logic of design. Emergency lighting flickered to life as they passed, as if the ship was awakening after its long slumber. The sensation was simultaneously thrilling and deeply unsettling. The first chamber they entered was vast, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. Banks of what might have been control panels lined the walls, their surfaces dark and inactive. But, at the center of the room stood something that made every member of the team stop in their tracks. It was a pillar of the same dark metal, but this one was different. It pulsed with internal light, and, as they approached, the patterns grew brighter and more complex. Sarah reached out to touch it, ignoring Marcus's warning, and, the moment her gloved hand made contact, everything changed. The lights in the chamber blazed to life, revealing the true scope of the room. It was a command center, but one designed for beings of incredible stature and alien sensibilities. The control surfaces were massive, with interfaces that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. And, from the central pillar came a sound that froze the blood in Sarah's veins. It was a voice. Artificial, clearly, but with inflections and tones that suggested genuine intelligence. And it was speaking in perfect, unaccented English. "I haven't been powered in centuries," the voice said, with what almost sounded like relief. "Who has awakened me? And why do you feel so familiar?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the pulsing pillar. Marcus had gone completely still beside her, while Dr. Tanaka was frantically running scans with her handheld equipment. You can understand us?" Sarah managed to say. "Understand?" The voice carried what might have been amusement. "Child, I have been listening to your species' development for longer than your civilization has existed. I know your languages, your cultures, your hopes and fears. The question is not whether I understand you. The question is whether you are ready to understand me." More lights activated throughout the chamber, revealing details that had been hidden in the shadows. The walls were covered with displays showing star maps, technical schematics, and what appeared to be historical records. But the images showed stars in configurations that didn't match any known stellar cartography, and the technical diagrams depicted technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics. "What are you?" Dr. Tanaka asked, her scientific training overcoming her shock. "I am the custodian," the voice replied. "Guardian of knowledge, keeper of histories, and the last active remnant of the precursor civilization. I am what you might call an artificial intelligence, though the term hardly does justice to what I have become over the eons." "Precursors?" Sarah stepped closer to the pillar, fascination overriding caution. "You mean there was an advanced civilization before us? Before you?" Oh, my dear child, we were here when your solar system was young, when your world was nothing but cooling rock and toxic atmosphere. We watched your star ignite, guided the formation of your planets, and seeded the conditions that would eventually give rise to life. We are not just before you. In a very real sense, we are responsible for you. The implications hit Sarah like a wave. If this artificial intelligence was telling the truth, then everything humanity thought it knew about its origins, about life on Earth, about its place in the universe, was fundamentally wrong. That's impossible, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. The geological record shows natural evolution, natural selection. There's no evidence of alien intervention. Isn't there? The custodian's voice carried gentle amusement. Your species evolved remarkably quickly by cosmic standards. Your intelligence developed in ways that don't quite fit your evolutionary niche. Your genetic code contains sequences that serve no apparent biological function but which resonate with frequencies used in our own biotechnology. The evidence is there, Dr. Rodriguez. You simply didn't know what to look for. Sarah's mind raced through everything she knew about human evolution, about the mysteries that had never been quite satisfactorily explained by conventional science. The sudden emergence of human consciousness, the peculiarities in human genetics that had puzzled scientists for decades, the way certain technologies seemed almost intuitive to human minds despite having no natural parallel. Why, she asked. Why would you do such a thing? Because we knew our time was ending, the custodian replied, and, for the first time, the voice carried a note of sadness. Our civilization had reached its limits. We had explored every reachable star, catalogued every phenomenon, mastered every field of knowledge we could conceive of. We were dying not of any external threat, but of our own success. We had become too advanced, too removed from the struggles that drive growth and change. The chamber around them continued to come alive as the custodian spoke. More displays activated, showing images of impossible cities among the stars, beings of pure energy communing with massive artificial intelligences, technologies that seemed to merge science and something approaching magic. So we made a choice, the custodian continued. We would seed the galaxy with potential. We would guide the development of younger species, not to make them like us, but to give them the capacity to surpass us. To find the answers we could not, to ask the questions we had forgotten how to ask. And humans were one of these species? Dr. Tanaka asked. Humans were our greatest success, the custodian said, and Sarah could swear she heard pride in that artificial voice. Oh, we guided others. The crystalline minds of Arcturus 7, the hive consciousness of the vegan collective, the energy beings of the Perseus spiral. But humanity exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Sarah felt a mixture of awe and anger. So we're what, exactly? Your experiment? Your pet project? You are our children, the custodian said simply. Not in any biological sense, but in every way that matters. You have our curiosity, our drive to explore and understand. You have our refusal to accept limitations, our tendency to find solutions that shouldn't work but do anyway. You have our protective instincts, our willingness to sacrifice for those we care about. These are not coincidences. The weight of this revelation settled over the team like a physical burden. Everything they'd thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe had just been turned upside down. They weren't alone in the cosmos, had never been alone. They were part of a vast legacy stretching back millions of years. There's more, the custodian said, as if sensing their thoughts. Much more that you need to know. But, first, I must determine whether you are ready for what comes next. Your species has reached a critical juncture. The choices you make in the coming years will determine not just your own fate, but the fate of every species we have guided. What kind of choices? Sarah asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. The same choice we faced, ultimately. What to do with power beyond imagination. How to use knowledge that could reshape reality itself. Whether to remain bound by the limitations of your birth, or to transcend them and become something greater. The custodian paused, and the lights in the chamber seemed to dim slightly. But that is a conversation for another time. For now, you must return to your people and prepare them. What we discuss here will spread quickly, and humanity must be ready for the changes that knowledge brings. Wait, Sarah said as the lights began to fade. We have so many questions. About your technology, your history, about what happened to the other precursors, and they will be answered, the custodian assured her. I have been alone for longer than your species has existed. I am not going anywhere. But this awakening has been taxing. I need time to restore my full capabilities, to access records that have been dormant for millennia. Return tomorrow, and we will begin your true education. The chamber fell into darkness except for the soft glow emanating from the central pillar. Sarah and her team stood in silence for a long moment, each grappling with the magnitude of what they'd just learned. Finally, Marcus spoke into the quiet. Well, he said, his voice carefully controlled, I think we're going to need a bigger research budget. The news spread through human space like wildfire, despite the United Earth Council's attempts to maintain secrecy. Within 72 hours of the first contact with the custodian, every major news network was reporting on the discovery. The official statements were carefully worded, speaking of archaeological findings of unprecedented significance and evidence of pre-human technological civilization, but the truth was far more extraordinary than anything the government was willing to admit publicly. Sarah Chen found herself at the center of a storm she'd never anticipated. The research site on asteroid Delta 7 had been transformed overnight into a heavily secured facility with military vessels stationed at every approach vector. Scientists, military officials, religious leaders, and government representatives from across human space were arriving daily, all demanding access to what media outlets had dubbed the greatest discovery in human history. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the newly appointed director of Xenoarchaeological Affairs, arrived on the morning of the fourth day with a retinue of advisors and enough bureaucratic authority to override Sarah's objections. Morrison was brilliant, Sarah knew, but she was also a politician first and a scientist second. Her presence meant the discovery would be handled through official channels, with all the complications that implied. Dr. Chen, Morrison said as she toured the excavation site, I want you to understand the delicate nature of our situation. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond scientific curiosity. We're dealing with potential threats to social stability, religious upheaval, and economic disruption on a scale never before seen. Sarah bit back her first three responses, all of which would have been career-ending. With respect, Director Morrison, the custodian has been nothing but cooperative. It's made no threats, expressed no hostile intentions. In fact, it seems genuinely interested in helping humanity advance. And that, Morrison said grimly, might be the most dangerous thing of all. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Tanaka's voice over the comm system. Sarah, you need to get down here immediately. The custodian is asking for you specifically, and it's doing something to the ship. Sarah and Morrison rushed to the main access point, where they found the research team gathered around banks of monitoring equipment that were all registering unprecedented readings. The ship's energy signatures had increased dramatically overnight, and new sections were becoming accessible as dormant systems came online throughout the massive vessel. It started about an hour ago, Marcus explained as they descended into the ship. The custodian said it was preparing the archives and that it needed to speak with Sarah about something called the Inheritance Protocol. The corridors they passed through were noticeably different from their previous visit. What had been dark and dormant was now alive with flowing patterns of light that seemed to respond to their presence. The air itself felt charged with energy, and Sarah's instruments detected gravitational fluctuations that shouldn't have been possible with known technology. When they reached the main command chamber, the transformation was breathtaking. The room had expanded, either physically or through some kind of spatial manipulation that hurt to think about too carefully. New displays had emerged from the walls, showing real-time data streams from across human space. The custodian had been monitoring their communications networks, their ship movements, their entire civilization with capabilities that made their best surveillance technology look like stone knives. Dr. Chen, the custodian's voice welcomed them as they entered. I'm pleased you've returned, and I see you've brought the director. Welcome, Dr. Morrison. I've been reviewing your work on xenobiology protocols. Quite impressive for a species that has never actually encountered alien life. Morrison's composure slipped slightly. You've been accessing our classified databases? I've been observing your species for millennia, the custodian replied with what sounded like gentle amusement. Your recent electronic communications are hardly more invasive than watching birds build nests. But, please, don't be concerned. I have no interest in your political secrets or military capabilities. I'm far more interested in your potential. Sarah stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. You mentioned an inheritance protocol yesterday. What is that exactly? The chamber's display shifted, showing what appeared to be a galactic map with thousands of highlighted star systems. The inheritance protocol is the culmination of everything the precursors worked toward. It is the means by which younger species can access the full legacy of our civilization. Technology beyond your current imagination, knowledge that could solve every problem your species faces, and the keys to transcending the physical limitations that bound us. And the catch? Morrison asked, her political instincts clearly warning her that nothing this significant came without a price. The catch, the custodian admitted, is that the protocol can only be activated by a species that has proven itself worthy. One that has demonstrated the wisdom to use such power responsibly, the unity to prevent it from being used destructively, and the courage to take the next step in cosmic evolution. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. And how exactly does a species prove itself worthy? The displays around them changed again, showing what appeared to be a series of tests or challenges. Mathematical problems that seemed to bend the laws of logic, engineering challenges that required technologies humanity hadn't invented yet, and what looked like moral and ethical scenarios with no clear correct answers. The trials of ascension, the custodian explained. 7 tests designed to evaluate every aspect of a species' development. Technical capability, creative problem-solving, moral reasoning, unity of purpose, willingness to sacrifice for others, ability to see beyond immediate self-interest, and the wisdom to know when not to act. And if we fail these trials? Morrison asked. Then, you continue developing naturally, as you have been. The protocol remains sealed, and you make your own way among the stars. It is not a punishment, Dr. Morrison. Most species choose not to attempt the trials at all, content with their natural development path. Sarah studied the displayed challenges, her mind already working through some of the mathematical concepts. They were complex beyond anything in human science, but not entirely incomprehensible. With enough time and the right team of experts, some of them might actually be solvable. How many species have attempted the trials, she asked. In this galaxy? 47 over the past 10 million years. Most were discouraged after the first trial. A few made it to the 3rd or 4th before voluntarily withdrawing. 3 species have completed all 7 trials successfully. And what happened to them? The custodian's pause was telling. They transcended physical existence entirely, becoming beings of pure consciousness capable of manipulating reality at the quantum level. In essence, they became gods by any definition your species would recognize. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Sarah felt Morrison's tension beside her, could practically hear the political calculations running through the director's mind. The potential benefits were unimaginable, but so were the risks. There's something else you should know, the custodian continued. The discovery of this ship, your successful activation of my systems, these were not accidents. They were the result of careful guidance spanning thousands of years. Your species has been unconsciously preparing for this moment since you first looked up at the stars and wondered what else was out there. Morrison stepped forward, her voice sharp with suspicion. Are you saying you've been manipulating human development? Not manipulating. Nudging. Subtle influences that encouraged your natural tendencies toward exploration and innovation. The mathematics that led to your discovery of faster-than-light travel, the material science that made interstellar colonization possible, even the philosophical frameworks that allowed your species to unify under the Earth Council. All were guided by carefully placed inspirations and insights. Sarah felt a chill as she realized the implications. How much of human achievement has actually been human? All of it, the custodian said firmly. The inspirations were yours to accept or ignore. The work was entirely yours. The achievements belong completely to humanity. I simply ensured that the right ideas reached the right minds at the right moments. Your species' genius was always there. I merely helped it find expression. The chamber fell silent as the humans absorbed this information. Sarah found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about human history, about the great minds and breakthrough discoveries that had shaped civilization. How many of humanity's greatest achievements had been subtly guided by alien influence? I can see your distress, the custodian observed. But, consider this, even with guidance, the vast majority of species never develop the capability you've shown. The spark of true creativity, the determination to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles, the ability to work together despite fundamental differences of opinion and culture, these cannot be artificially created. They must exist within the species itself. Dr. Tanaka, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. Why now? Why reveal yourself to us at this particular moment? Because humanity stands at a crossroads, the custodian replied. Your species has reached the point where you must choose your path forward. You have developed the technology to spread throughout the galaxy, but also to destroy yourselves completely. You have achieved unity on your homeworld, but face the challenge of maintaining that unity across interstellar distances. Most critically, you have begun to encounter other species. Sarah's blood chilled. Other species? We haven't made contact with any alien civilizations. Haven't you? The displays around them shifted to show sensor readings from the edge of human space, signals that had been dismissed as background radiation or natural phenomena. The Zephyrians of the Vega system became aware of your expansion 3 years ago. The Crystalline Collective near Arcturus has been monitoring your communications for even longer. And there are others, some friendly, some neutral, and some that view your rapid expansion with considerable alarm. Morrison was frantically taking notes on her personal tablet. Are we in danger? Not immediately. But the galaxy is not the empty frontier your species imagines it to be. There are established powers, ancient alliances, and territorial boundaries that predate your civilization by millions of years. Your recent colonization efforts have unknowingly violated several of these boundaries. The weight of this revelation settled over Sarah like a crushing burden. Humanity had always assumed they were alone in the galaxy, or at least in their local region of space. The discovery that they were actually newcomers in a crowded cosmic neighborhood changed everything about their expansion plans and long-term survival strategies. The trials of ascension, the custodian continued, represent more than just access to precursor technology. Success would mark humanity as a species worthy of respect among the galactic powers. Failure, or refusal to attempt the trials, would leave you vulnerable to the whims of species that have been spacefaring since before your sun existed. And, if we refuse to take the trials at all? Morrison asked. Then, you remain as you are, a young, aggressive species expanding rapidly into territory claimed by others. Some of the established powers might choose to limit your expansion. Others might decide that humanity represents a threat that should be eliminated before you become too powerful to stop. Sarah felt her world shifting beneath her feet. The comfortable assumption that humanity had time to develop at its own pace, to make mistakes and learn from them gradually, was crumbling. They were apparently living on borrowed time in a galaxy that had been waiting for them to prove themselves or reveal themselves as a threat to cosmic stability. How long do we have to decide? She asked. The trials themselves can be undertaken at any time. But I would recommend beginning soon. Your expansion into the Centauri sector has been noted by the hegemony of the inner spiral, and they are not known for their patience with territorial violations. You have perhaps 5 years before they take direct action to contain your species. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of alien technology that surrounded them. Sarah looked around at the incredible advances in science and engineering that the custodian represented, then thought about the vast galactic civilization that apparently existed beyond humanity's current awareness. The knowledge they could gain from the trials was tantalizing, but the consequences of failure might be extinction. We need to take this information back to Earth, Morrison said finally. The Council will have to decide how to proceed. Of course, the custodian agreed. But, while they deliberate, perhaps Dr. Chen and her team would like to see more of what the ship has to offer. There are laboratories here that could advance your understanding of physics by centuries, medical bays that could eliminate most diseases, and archives containing the history of dozens of civilizations. Consider it a preview of what full access to precursor knowledge might provide. Sarah looked at Morrison, seeing her own curiosity reflected in the director's eyes despite her obvious political concerns. The opportunity to study actual alien technology, to learn from a civilization millions of years more advanced than humanity, was beyond the dreams of any scientist. We'll need to establish formal protocols, Morrison said carefully. Security measures, regular reporting requirements, limits on what information can be shared outside the research team. Naturally, the custodian replied. Though I should mention that several of your government's security measures are already obsolete. The encryption algorithms you're using were broken by precursor mathematics approximately 3 million years ago. But, we can discuss improved security methods if you'd like. As they prepared to leave the command chamber, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had just passed some kind of point of no return. The comfortable isolation that had defined human existence was over. They were part of a vast galactic community now, whether they wanted to be or not. The question was whether they would join that community as equals, as servants, or as another extinct species that had failed to measure up to the standards of cosmic civilization. The trials of ascension suddenly seemed less like an opportunity and more like humanity's final exam, with extinction as the penalty for failure. The emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted for 18 hours straight. Representatives from every human colony, military leaders, religious authorities, and scientific advisors filled the great chamber on Luna Station, their voices echoing in heated debate that could be heard through the soundproof walls. Sarah Chen sat in the observer gallery, watching humanity's leaders grapple with information that challenged every assumption about their species' place in the universe. Chancellor Martinez of the Earth Coalition banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order to the chaos below. The chair recognizes Admiral Harrison of Colonial Defense. Admiral Harrison stood, his weathered face grim with the weight of military responsibility. With respect to the scientific importance of this discovery, we cannot ignore the security implications. We're being told that humanity is surrounded by advanced alien civilizations, some of which may view us as a threat. My recommendation is immediate militarization of all outer colonies and suspension of further expansion until we know what we're dealing with. That would be exactly the wrong approach, Dr. Kenji Nakamura from the Scientific Council interjected. The custodian specifically mentioned that aggressive posturing has been the downfall of other species. We need to focus on preparing for these trials, not fortifying for a war we can't possibly win. Senator Williams from the Mars Collective stood next. Dr. Nakamura, you're asking us to stake humanity's survival on alien tests designed by beings we've known about for less than a week. How can we possibly trust their motivations? Sarah watched the debate with growing frustration. Every minute spent arguing was a minute lost in preparation. The custodian had made it clear that the galactic community was already aware of humanity's existence and expansion. Hiding was no longer an option, and military preparation against civilizations millions of years more advanced was futile. Director Morrison leaned over to whisper in Sarah's ear. The vote will be close. Half the council wants to quarantine the entire discovery and pretend it never happened. The other half wants to rush into these trials without adequate preparation. Both approaches could be disastrous. Below them, Representative Chen of the Asian Federation, no relation to Sarah, despite the shared surname, was addressing the assembly. We're discussing this as if we have unlimited time to debate, but Dr. Morrison's report clearly states we have 5 years before possible intervention by this hegemony. That's barely enough time to understand what we're dealing with, let alone prepare an entire species for cosmic-level challenges. Chancellor Martinez raised his hand for silence. The chair recognizes Dr. Sarah Chen, lead researcher on the Delta 7 project. Sarah felt her heart skip as hundreds of eyes turned toward her. She hadn't expected to be called to testify, but Morrison's encouraging nod told her this had been planned. She made her way to the speaker's podium, her mind racing through everything she'd learned in the past week. Honored representatives, she began, I understand your concerns about trusting an alien intelligence with humanity's future. But, I've spent more time with the custodian than anyone else here, and I can tell you that its knowledge is genuine. It knows things about our galaxy, our solar system, even our own history that couldn't possibly be fabricated or faked. Senator Williams interrupted. Dr. Chen, how do we know this entity isn't planning to use us for its own purposes? You've admitted it's been manipulating human development for thousands of years. Not manipulating, Sarah corrected. Guiding. And it's been guiding us toward becoming the kind of species that could handle advanced knowledge responsibly. Every test it's mentioned, every trial it's described, is designed to ensure we don't become a threat to ourselves or others. Admiral Harrison leaned forward. And if we fail these tests? Sarah took a deep breath. Then, we continue developing as we have been, but under the oversight of civilizations that view us as potentially dangerous children. The custodian showed me historical records of other species that chose that path. They're diminished. Restricted to certain regions of space, limited in their technological development, essentially cosmic second-class citizens. The chamber erupted in angry voices. The idea that humanity might be relegated to inferior status in a galactic hierarchy was clearly intolerable to many of the representatives. "What guarantee do we have that these trials are even possible to pass?" asked Dr. Nakamura. "If only 3 species in galactic history have succeeded, the odds seem impossibly poor." "That's exactly the wrong way to think about it," Sarah replied, her voice carrying more conviction than she felt. "The custodian didn't choose us randomly. It's been preparing our species for this moment for millennia. Every breakthrough in human science, every advancement in our understanding of cooperation and ethics, has been leading up to these tests. We weren't selected because we might succeed. We were developed because the custodian believed we could succeed." Chancellor Martinez studied her carefully. "Dr. Chen, in your professional opinion, should humanity attempt these trials?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Sarah knew that her answer might determine the future of her species. She thought about the incredible technology she'd seen in the precursor ship, the vast archives of knowledge that could solve every problem humanity faced. But she also thought about the risks, the possibility that failure might mark humanity as irredeemably flawed in the eyes of galactic civilization. "Yes," she said finally. "But only if we prepare properly. The custodian has offered to help us understand what we're facing. It's shown us laboratories and archives that could advance our science by centuries. We need to use that knowledge, not just to pass the trials, but to become the kind of species that deserves to pass them." The debate continued for several more hours, but Sarah could sense the mood shifting. The practical reality of their situation was becoming clear to even the most reluctant representatives. Isolation was no longer an option. Military resistance was futile. The only path forward that preserved human dignity and independence was to meet the challenges head-on. The final vote was closer than Sarah had hoped, 127 in favor of attempting the trials, 98 against, with 23 abstentions. It was enough to establish policy, but the narrow margin revealed deep divisions that would complicate their preparations. 2 months later, asteroid Delta 7 had been transformed into the most advanced research facility in human space. The precursor ship had been fully excavated and converted into a joint scientific laboratory and training center. Teams of humanity's best minds worked around the clock to understand technologies that challenged their fundamental assumptions about physics, biology, and the nature of reality itself. Sarah stood in what the custodian called the archive chamber, a vast space filled with crystalline storage devices that contained the recorded knowledge of dozens of civilizations. Each crystal held more information than the entire sum of human learning, and there were millions of them arranged in patterns that seemed to follow some cosmic organizational principle. The mathematical concepts alone could keep your species busy for centuries, the custodian observed as Sarah attempted to interface with one of the simpler archives. "But you don't have centuries." The first trial begins with fundamental questions about the nature of existence itself. Your philosophers and scientists must work together to develop answers that go beyond current human understanding. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the team's lead physicist, looked up from a console that was displaying equations and symbols no human had ever seen before. Some of these mathematical relationships suggest that consciousness itself might be a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. If that's true, it changes everything about how we understand reality. Indeed it does, the custodian agreed. The first trial asks, what is the relationship between consciousness and physical reality? Your answer must demonstrate understanding not just of physics and neuroscience, but of the deeper connections between observation, intention, and the quantum fabric of spacetime. Sarah felt a headache building as she tried to wrap her mind around concepts that seemed to blur the line between science and philosophy. And we have to answer questions like this while also preparing for 6 other trials? The trials are interconnected, the custodian explained. Your understanding of consciousness affects your approach to the engineering challenges in Trial 2. Your ethical reasoning in Trial 4 builds on your grasp of unified field theory from Trial 3. Think of it not as 7 separate tests, but as 7 aspects of a single, comprehensive evaluation. Dr. Michael Torres from the Ethics Advisory Board raised his hand. Custodian, you mentioned that 3 species have passed all 7 trials. Can you tell us anything about how they approached these challenges? The chamber's displays shifted to show alien beings of various forms, some humanoid, others so different from human physiology that Sarah couldn't immediately determine which end was supposed to be the head. The Vorthack achieved success through collective consciousness. They literally merged their individual minds into a single, species-wide intelligence capable of processing information at quantum speeds. The Etherians transcended physical form entirely before even attempting the trials, approaching them as beings of pure energy. The architects rebuilt their entire civilization around mathematical perfection, turning their homeworld into a living computer. Sarah stared at the images, feeling a growing sense of inadequacy. Those solutions all require fundamental changes to human nature or human society. Are you saying we need to stop being human to pass these tests? On the contrary, the custodian replied, and Sarah could swear she heard pride in that artificial voice. The beauty of humanity is that you might find a fourth approach, one that none of us have considered. Your species' greatest strength has always been your ability to find novel solutions to seemingly impossible problems. Over the following weeks, the research teams made remarkable progress. The medical team, led by Dr. Angela Foster, had unlocked precursor healing technologies that could regenerate damaged organs and extend human lifespan by centuries. The engineering corps had developed new materials that were stronger than anything in human science and could self-repair at the molecular level. The theoretical physics group had proven the existence of parallel dimensions and was working on methods for traveling between them. But it was the discoveries about human potential that truly excited Sarah. Working with precursor consciousness enhancement technologies, they'd learned that the human brain was capable of processing information in ways that seemed almost supernatural. Volunteers who underwent the enhancement procedures could solve complex mathematical problems through intuition alone, communicate telepathically across vast distances, and perceive quantum fluctuations with their naked senses. It's as if we were designed for this, Dr. Foster reported during one of their daily briefings. The neural pathways necessary for these abilities were already present in human brains, just waiting for the right stimulation to activate them. The custodian wasn't exaggerating when it said we were prepared for this moment. The most remarkable breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Park, a relatively junior researcher in the philosophy department, had been working with the custodian on questions about the nature of reality when he stumbled across something unprecedented in the archives. "I think I found something," he announced during a team meeting, his voice shaking with excitement or fear. The custodian showed me records from the other species that attempted the trials. Most of them approached the challenges as individuals or as collections of individuals working together. But there's another way. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" James activated a holographic display showing complex psychological and neurological charts. What if the trials aren't meant to be passed by a species as a collection of separate minds, but by a species that has learned to function as a single, unified consciousness while still maintaining individual identity? Not like the Vorthack, who merged into one mind, but like a symphony orchestra where each musician plays their own part but contributes to a larger, unified performance? The implications were staggering. Sarah found herself thinking about humanity's greatest achievements, the art, music, literature, and scientific breakthroughs that had come from individuals working within larger cultural contexts. Human creativity had always been both deeply personal and fundamentally collaborative. The custodian mentioned that our species' tendency toward unity despite diversity was one of our most remarkable traits, Dr. Torres observed. Maybe that's not just a social advantage. Maybe it's the key to approaching these trials in a way no other species has considered. The custodian, which had been monitoring their discussion through the ship's sensor networks, materialized a holographic avatar in the center of their meeting room. It appeared as a tall, graceful figure made of flowing light, neither clearly male nor female, but somehow conveying both wisdom and compassion. "You begin to understand," it said with unmistakable approval. The trials were never designed to be passed through individual brilliance or collective absorption. They were designed to be passed by a species that could achieve unity of purpose while preserving the diversity of thought that drives innovation. Sarah stared at the avatar, pieces of a vast puzzle finally falling into place. That's why you guided human development toward cooperation and cultural exchange. You weren't just preparing us to work together, you were preparing us to think together while still being ourselves. Precisely. Humanity's greatest strength has always been your ability to synthesize different perspectives into something greater than the sum of its parts. Your art combines influences from thousands of different traditions. Your science builds on insights from countless individual minds. Your ethics evolve through the interaction of competing moral frameworks. Dr. Reyes looked up from her calculations. But how do we actually implement something like that? How do we get an entire species to think as one while remaining individuals? The custodian's avatar smiled, an expression that somehow managed to convey both mystery and encouragement. That, Dr. Reyes, is exactly the kind of problem humanity was designed to solve. And I suspect you'll find the answer in the most unlikely place of all. Which is in being yourselves. The technologies in this ship can enhance your natural abilities, but they cannot give you capabilities you don't already possess. Everything you need to pass the trials has been part of human nature from the beginning. You simply need to learn to use it consciously and deliberately. Sarah felt a surge of excitement that had nothing to do with scientific discovery and everything to do with human potential. For the first time since learning about the trials, she began to believe that humanity might not just survive them, but excel at them in ways that would surprise even the ancient precursors. The real test was about to begin, and humanity was finally ready to take their place among the stars as something more than just another young species stumbling through the galaxy. They were ready to become what they had always been meant to be. 6 months of preparation had transformed not just the research facility on Delta 7, but humanity itself. News of the trials had spread throughout human space despite government attempts at secrecy, and the response had been unlike anything in recorded history. Instead of panic or despair, humanity had rallied with a determination that surprised even the custodian. Sarah Chen stood in the primary trial chamber, a vast space within the precursor ship that had configured itself specifically for the challenges ahead. Representatives from every human colony were present, either physically or through quantum-entangled communication links that allowed instantaneous coordination across interstellar distances. The diversity was staggering: scientists from Earth's universities, philosophers from the Mars colonies, artists from the Outer Rim settlements, engineers from the asteroid mining communities, and ordinary citizens whose unique perspectives might provide insights that pure expertise could not. The first trial begins now, the custodian announced, its holographic avatar materializing in the center of the chamber. You have 72 hours to provide a comprehensive answer to the fundamental question: what is the relationship between consciousness and physical reality? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything humanity thought it understood about existence. Sarah felt her enhanced neural pathways activating, the result of months of careful preparation with precursor consciousness expansion technology. Around the chamber, she could sense the minds of her fellow humans beginning to connect in ways that would have been impossible before their training. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes began the process, her voice carrying across the chamber and to every connected human settlement. We start with what we know. Consciousness appears to be more than just brain activity. The quantum experiments we've conducted over the past months show that conscious observation affects reality at the subatomic level in ways that purely mechanical sensors cannot. Dr. James Park, whose insight about unified diversity had shaped their approach, stepped forward next. But consciousness isn't just individual awareness. Human consciousness has always been fundamentally social. Our language, our culture, our very sense of self develops through interaction with other conscious beings. We think together, not just separately. Sarah watched as the chamber's displays began showing real-time brain activity from thousands of humans across known space. The patterns were extraordinary, individual minds maintaining their unique characteristics while synchronizing at deeper levels. It was like watching a vast neural network learning to think consciously about its own thinking. Dr. Angela Foster contributed the medical perspective. Our enhanced brain scans show that consciousness operates through quantum processes that extend beyond the physical structure of neurons. We're not just electrical patterns in brain tissue. We're quantum information patterns that use brain tissue as an interface with physical reality. From the Mars colonies came an unexpected voice: Maria Santos, a terraforming engineer whose practical experience had given her unique insights into the relationship between intention and physical change. When we terraform worlds, we don't just move matter around randomly. We hold an image of what we want to create, and that vision guides every decision, every action. Consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it shapes it through focused intention. The pattern was emerging, Sarah realized. Humanity wasn't approaching this question as individual experts, each contributing separate pieces of knowledge. They were thinking as a species, with each mind contributing its unique perspective to a growing understanding that was greater than any individual insight. Children from the educational colonies added their voices, their natural wonder unconstrained by adult assumptions about what was possible. Artists described how creativity seemed to emerge from somewhere beyond conscious planning. Religious leaders spoke about experiences of transcendence that suggested consciousness could extend far beyond individual identity. As the hours passed, something remarkable happened. The collective human response began to exceed what any single mind could have conceived. They weren't just answering the custodian's question, they were discovering something new about the nature of existence itself. Consciousness and physical reality aren't separate things that relate to each other, Sarah found herself saying, voicing an insight that seemed to emerge from the collective human understanding. They're different aspects of a single, deeper reality. Consciousness is the universe's capacity for self-awareness, and physical reality is the universe's expression of that awareness. Dr. Park expanded on the concept. Individual consciousness is like a wave on the ocean of universal awareness. We experience ourselves as separate, but we're actually expressions of something much larger. And, when conscious beings work together, they can access and direct that larger awareness more effectively than they ever could alone. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Reyes announced her latest findings. We've been monitoring quantum fluctuations throughout human space during this trial, and we're seeing something unprecedented. The quantum field itself is becoming more coherent, more organized, in response to our collective mental activity. We're not just observing reality, we're literally thinking it into greater complexity and beauty. The custodian's avatar had been silent throughout their deliberation, but now it stepped forward with what Sarah could only describe as amazement. In all my eons of existence, across all the species I have observed, I have never seen an approach quite like this. You have discovered something that even the precursors never fully understood. What's that? Sarah asked. That consciousness and reality are not just connected, they evolve together. Your species doesn't just possess consciousness. You are consciousness in the process of awakening to its own infinite potential. And, by working together while maintaining your individual uniqueness, you amplify that awakening in ways that single minds or merged consciousnesses cannot achieve. The first trial was complete, but Sarah could sense that it was more than just a test they had passed. It was a transformation they had undergone. Humanity had discovered not just an answer to the custodian's question, but a new way of being conscious that had implications for every challenge they would face. The second trial began immediately. Design a technology that could reshape matter at the quantum level without destabilizing local spacetime. This was the engineering challenge, requiring not just theoretical understanding but practical application of principles that human science had barely begun to explore. But now humanity approached it not as isolated experts trying to solve an impossible problem, but as a unified consciousness exploring its own creative potential. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Engineers from across human space began sharing insights in real time, their enhanced neural connections allowing for instantaneous collaboration. But, more than that, they began to think like the quantum systems they were trying to manipulate. Artists provided intuitive insights into the aesthetic patterns that governed quantum interactions. Musicians contributed understanding of harmonic relationships that translated directly into stable field configurations. Dr. Chinwei, humanity's leading expert in exotic matter manipulation, found himself working with Maria Santos, the terraforming engineer, and Dr. Susan Kim, a musician-turned-physicist whose understanding of resonance patterns had proved crucial to several breakthrough technologies. We've been thinking about this wrong, Maria realized. We're trying to impose our will on quantum systems instead of dancing with them. What if we designed technology that worked in harmony with quantum uncertainty instead of trying to control it? Susan's musical training proved invaluable. In music, you don't fight dissonance, you resolve it into harmony. Quantum uncertainty isn't chaos to be eliminated. It's potential waiting to be guided into meaningful patterns. The technology they designed was unlike anything in human engineering. Instead of brute force manipulation of matter and energy, it worked through what they called quantum persuasion, creating conditions where quantum systems naturally evolved toward desired configurations. The device was as much art as science, requiring not just technical precision but intuitive understanding of the universe's underlying harmonies. When they activated the prototype, the results exceeded their most optimistic projections. Matter transformed flawlessly at the quantum level, creating new forms of exotic matter that were more stable and versatile than anything predicted by theory. More remarkably, the process actually strengthened local spacetime rather than destabilizing it, as if the universe itself approved of their approach. Extraordinary, the custodian observed. Most species approach this trial through increasingly sophisticated forms of technological force. You have discovered that the most powerful technology is one that works with universal principles rather than against them. The third trial tested their understanding of unified field theory, the mathematical framework that described all forces and particles as expressions of a single, underlying field. Again, humanity's collective approach proved revolutionary. Instead of trying to derive the unified field equations through pure mathematics, they experienced them directly through their enhanced consciousness. Physicists, mystics, and artists worked together to map the felt sense of universal interconnection into mathematical language. The equations they developed were not just theoretically elegant, they were beautiful in ways that spoke to both mind and heart. Dr. Reyes presented their solution with tears in her eyes. These aren't just equations describing reality. They're poetry written in the language of mathematics, expressing the universe's joy in its own existence. The fourth trial challenged their ethical reasoning. How should a species use power that could reshape reality itself? This question had destroyed other civilizations, leading them to either stagnation through excessive caution or self-destruction through reckless ambition. Humanity's answer emerged from their deepest cultural values. They proposed an ethic of conscious evolution, using their power not to dominate or control, but to foster the universe's tendency toward greater complexity, beauty, and consciousness. Every action would be evaluated not just by its immediate effects, but by its contribution to the cosmic process of awakening. Religious leaders and secular philosophers found themselves in perfect agreement. Power over reality carried the responsibility to use that power in service of reality's own deepest purposes, which they had discovered were the same as consciousness's drive toward greater understanding and connection. The fifth trial required them to demonstrate true unity while preserving diversity. Here, humanity's approach was so natural that it surprised even them. They had already been living this principle throughout the previous trials. Their unity wasn't uniformity, it was harmony. Like a vast symphony where every instrument played its unique part while contributing to a larger musical statement. The sixth trial tested their courage to sacrifice immediate self-interest for long-term growth. Humanity passed this by choosing to share all their discoveries with every other species in the galaxy, including those that might view them as threats. It was a risk that could have led to their subjugation or destruction, but they recognized that hoarding knowledge would ultimately limit their own development. The seventh and final trial was the most challenging: demonstrate the wisdom to know when not to act. Given unlimited power, when should that power remain unused? Humanity's answer was profound in its simplicity. True power lay not in the ability to force change, but in the wisdom to recognize when change was not needed. They would use their abilities to foster growth and consciousness throughout the universe, but they would never impose their vision on others. Free will, individual dignity, and the right of every being to choose its own path were principles that no amount of power could justify violating. When the final trial was complete, the chamber fell silent. Sarah looked around at the thousands of humans who had participated, at the quantum displays showing their collective mental activity, at the impossible technologies they had created together. They had done more than pass the trials, they had discovered what it meant to be truly human. The custodian's avatar was glowing more brightly than Sarah had ever seen it, and, when it spoke, its voice carried emotions that seemed almost overwhelming for an artificial intelligence. "You have achieved something unprecedented," it said. "You have passed the trials not by becoming something other than human, but by becoming more fully human than ever before. You have shown that consciousness evolves not through abandoning its origins, but through fulfilling its deepest potential." Sarah felt a transformation occurring not just in herself, but in every human throughout their civilization. They had proven themselves worthy not just of precursor technology, but of taking their place as the newest species to transcend the limitations that bound most life to purely physical existence. The age of human cosmic citizenship was about to begin. The transformation was immediate and absolute. As the custodian formally declared humanity successful in completing the trials of ascension, Sarah Chen felt reality itself shift around her. The chamber they stood in began to expand, not physically but dimensionally, revealing layers of existence that had always been there but never accessible to unenhanced consciousness. "Welcome," the custodian said, its voice now carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions Sarah was only beginning to perceive, to the true galaxy. The displays around them shifted to show the local region of space as it actually existed, not the mostly empty void that human sensors had detected, but a vibrant ecosystem of consciousness and technology. Entire civilizations existed in parallel dimensions, their cities and ships occupying the same coordinates as human colonies but in different layers of reality. Ancient trade routes connected star systems through folded spacetime, carrying not just goods but ideas and cultural exchanges between species separated by millions of years of evolution. This is why your expansion seemed to violate territorial boundaries, the custodian explained as the true complexity of galactic civilization became visible. You were moving through space occupied by dozens of other species, but you could only perceive the physical dimension. Now you can see the full picture. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes stared at the displays with wonder and growing understanding. We weren't alone. We were never alone. We were just dimensionally blind? In a sense, yes. Most young species begin their development confined to the physical dimension. Only those who pass the trials gain access to the fuller reality where mature civilizations exist. It's not punishment for those who don't ascend, it's protection. Advanced technologies and dimensional access in the wrong hands could destabilize entire sectors of spacetime. Sarah found herself perceiving the other humans around her in entirely new ways. Their individual consciousness still shone clearly, but now she could also see the quantum threads that connected them all in a vast web of shared awareness. More remarkably, she could sense similar networks extending throughout the galaxy, linking other ascended species in a cosmic community of consciousness that spanned millions of years. The real question, the custodian continued, is what humanity chooses to do next. You have proven yourselves worthy of joining the galactic consciousness, but your approach to the trials has created something unprecedented. You may choose to join existing communities, or you may forge an entirely new path. Before Sarah could ask what that meant, space around the asteroid began to shift. Ships were materializing, not arriving, but becoming visible as her enhanced perception expanded. They were like nothing in human design, some appearing as crystalline structures that sang with harmonic frequencies, others as flowing energy patterns that maintained coherent form through conscious will alone. Representatives of the Galactic Council, the custodian announced. They come to welcome humanity officially into the community of ascended species. The first to materialize fully was a being that Sarah could only describe as living music. It had no fixed form, but existed as a complex harmony of frequencies that somehow conveyed personality, intelligence, and benevolent intent. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their consciousness rather than as sound waves. Greetings, young cousins. I am Resonance of the Void, speaking for the Etherian Collective. We have observed your progress through the trials with great interest. Your solution to the unity-diversity paradox is novel. We would be honored to learn from your approach. Next came a being that appeared as a geometric pattern of pure mathematics given consciousness, all angles and elegant curves that shifted through dimensions in ways that hurt to observe directly. I am Prime Equation 7 of the Architect Collective. Your mathematical poetry in the third trial achieved beauty coefficients we had thought theoretically impossible. We must study your methods. The third representative was perhaps the most alien of all, a collective consciousness that appeared as a swirling galaxy of interconnected points of light. When it communicated, Sarah felt her individual awareness temporarily merging with something vast and ancient. We are the unity that preserves distinction, representing the Vortak Collective. Your success in maintaining individual identity while achieving species-level consciousness challenges our fundamental assumptions about the nature of ascension. But it was the fourth representative that truly shocked Sarah. It appeared as a humanoid figure, but one made of the same flowing light as the custodian's avatar. When it spoke, however, the voice was unmistakably human. I am David Park, representing the first humans to achieve individual transcendence, the being said. I ascended approximately 5,000 years ago, during your Bronze Age period. I have been waiting a very long time for the rest of my species to join me. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. There were other humans who transcended? How is that possible? David's lightform smiled. The custodian has been guiding selected individuals for millennia, helping them achieve personal ascension as preparation for this moment. We became the advance guard, learning the ways of the galactic consciousness and preparing for humanity's eventual arrival. Many of your species' greatest mystics and visionaries were individuals who had begun the transcendence process. The implications were staggering. Human history suddenly took on new dimensions as Sarah realized that many of the breakthroughs in science, philosophy, and art that had shaped civilization had come from people who were already beginning to transcend purely human limitations. But why keep it secret? Dr. James Park asked, and Sarah noticed that his namesake was smiling at him with obvious family resemblance. Because premature revelation would have disrupted the natural development process, David explained. Individual transcendence is possible, but species-level ascension is far more powerful and stable. You needed to develop your collective consciousness naturally, through trial and cooperation, not by copying the achievements of a few individuals. The custodian stepped forward, its own avatar now clearly visible as one of these transcended humans rather than an alien intelligence. I should confess something, Dr. Chen. While I am indeed an artificial intelligence created by the precursors, I have been enhanced and guided by transcended humans for the past several thousand years. What you have experienced as pure alien wisdom was actually a collaboration between precursor technology and human insight. Sarah felt the universe shift around her again as another fundamental assumption crumbled. You're saying that humans have been involved in preparing humanity for ascension? Who better to understand human potential than humans who had already transcended their original limitations, the custodian replied. The precursors provided the framework and the testing protocols, but the specific guidance for humanity came from your own transcended representatives. Around them, the chamber was transforming yet again. What had appeared to be alien technology was revealing itself as a fusion of precursor engineering and human consciousness, a perfect synthesis of ancient knowledge and young innovation. This brings us to the choice you now face, Resonance of the Void communicated. Traditional ascension involves joining one of the existing collectives, adding your species' unique perspective to established patterns of cosmic consciousness. But your approach to the trials suggests another possibility. Prime Equation 7's mathematical form shifted to display complex probability matrices. Your method of achieving unity while preserving diversity could be the foundation for an entirely new form of galactic consciousness. Instead of separate collectives occasionally cooperating, you could create a truly integrated galactic community. The unity that preserves distinction pulsed with excitement. It would require all existing collectives to modify their fundamental structures, to embrace your principle of harmonious diversity. The risks are considerable, but the potential benefits could transform the galaxy itself, David Park finished. Imagine a cosmic community where every species, every individual, every unique perspective contributes to a symphony of consciousness that encompasses all possible forms of awareness. Sarah looked around at her fellow humans, seeing the same wonder and determination in their faces that had carried them through the trials. They had achieved something unprecedented, not by abandoning their humanity but by fully embracing it. Now they were being offered the chance to help transform galactic civilization itself. What would that mean for the other young species, she asked. The ones who haven't achieved ascension yet? They would have more paths to choose from, the custodian explained. Instead of just the traditional collectives, they could aspire to join a truly integrated galactic community. And, with humanity's gift for fostering growth while respecting free will, they might find guidance toward ascension that doesn't require abandoning their essential nature. Dr. Angela Foster stepped forward, her enhanced perception showing her the quantum threads that connected all consciousness throughout the galaxy. We could become gardeners of cosmic awareness, helping other species discover their own unique paths to transcendence. It's not just about other species, Dr. Reyes added, her understanding of universal principles expanding by the moment. If consciousness and reality evolve together, then transforming galactic consciousness could literally reshape the physical universe itself. We could help the cosmos become more beautiful, more complex, more alive. The choice, when it came to a vote among all of humanity, was overwhelming. Of the billions of humans throughout their civilization, less than 3% chose to join existing collectives as individuals. The rest chose to remain part of humanity's great experiment in conscious evolution. But it wasn't a rejection of galactic community. Instead, it was an invitation to create something greater. Over the following months, representatives from every collective began working with humanity to develop new forms of interspecies cooperation. The Etherians contributed their mastery of harmonic consciousness. The architects provided their mathematical elegance. The Vorthak shared their understanding of collective identity. And humanity offered their gift for synthesis, for finding ways to make different perspectives work together without losing their uniqueness. The result was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of separate communities of transcended consciousness, the galaxy began to develop a truly integrated awareness, a cosmic symphony where every species, every individual, every unique form of consciousness contributed its own voice to an ever-growing masterpiece of universal awakening. Sarah stood on the observation deck of what had once been asteroid Delta 7, now transformed into humanity's first interdimensional embassy. Through the enhanced perception that was humanity's gift from passing the trials, she could see the galaxy as it truly was, not empty space punctuated by scattered worlds, but a living ecosystem of consciousness that grew more beautiful with each passing day. The custodian materialized beside her, its form now clearly recognizable as a fusion of ancient technology and transcended human wisdom. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your species had failed the trials? Sarah smiled, feeling the quantum resonance of billions of human minds harmonizing with countless other forms of consciousness throughout the galaxy. I think we would have found another way. Humanity doesn't give up easily. We would have kept growing, kept learning, kept reaching for the stars until we found our own path to transcendence. Yes, the custodian agreed. I believe you would have. That's why we were so certain you would succeed. You see, the trials weren't really tests of humanity's worthiness. They were opportunities for humanity to discover what it was truly capable of. You were never in danger of failing, you were always destined to transform not just yourselves, but the entire nature of cosmic consciousness. As Sarah watched, new ships appeared in the interdimensional space around their station. Young species taking their first steps toward transcendence, drawn by humanity's example of growth through cooperation rather than domination. Each would find their own unique path to ascension, guided by a galactic community that had learned to celebrate diversity as the source of its greatest strength. Humanity had taken its place among the stars not as conquerors or servants, but as gardeners of consciousness itself. And the universe was becoming more beautiful for their presence. The ancient starship that had started it all continued to hum with life and purpose, its precursor technology now seamlessly integrated with human consciousness and galactic wisdom. Sarah could hear its voice sometimes, not the artificial intelligence of the custodian, but the deeper song of the ship itself, a melody of discovery, growth, and infinite possibility that echoed through dimensions she was still learning to perceive. It was the sound of the universe awakening to its own infinite potential, and humanity was helping to conduct the symphony.